Hi everybody, this is Monty Plazos, and today we're going to talk about the tarot. So the tarot is a divination system. Divination meaning the ability to to gather information that is normally inaccessible by human means. So divination is to look into the hidden realms and receive information about different things. So what we're going to talk about here with the tarot, and this is going to be a little bit more than a course or a lecture on the tarot per se, and more on how the tarot is used as a divinatory tool to assist the reader in helping other people or helping themselves, for that matter. So the tarot can be used in a lot of different ways. It's a form of guidance that you can use to help yourself and others. So what we're going to talk about here is, first off, we're going to discuss the tarot as a deck. It's a deck of 78 cards, and we're going to break it down into its component parts and take each one of those parts individually and explain what it is that it is conveying, what message that the card is giving to the reader. And then we're going to talk about the different spreads that you can use. And my method of using the tarot is a little bit different, I think, than what you may be seeing in some of the other videos that are available. I am coming from 30 years of experience as a professional card reader. I have been trained in several different schools of divination. So I incorporate a lot of different things. I incorporate numerology, I incorporate astrology, along with the tarot, and also my magical background and my occult studies. I incorporate also ritual into the prescriptions that I give, I guess would be the best way to say it, to clients that come to me. So when a client comes to a reader, they are coming to you with a problem, and that problem needs to be solved. Okay, so what the tarot and what the divination accomplishes is to find out where the person's life is lacking. What's lacking in their life? What energy is predominantly affecting their lives at this moment in a negative way? And how do we direct that? So if a person comes to you and they say, hey, look, you know what, I'm not having any luck in my love life at all. I can't seem to connect with anybody. I can't seem to, I just can't seem to get on point with a relationship. Then you read the cards, you lay the cards out, and you determine what is it that's causing this person to miss out. What's causing this person to not have an effective love life. And the cards will tell you where the energies are lacking, or where they're correct, or where they're not. And then as the reader, it's your job to determine what is it that this person have to do to get their life on track. You know, it's one thing to, the person comes in and you lay out the cards and they're like, oh yeah, you definitely have blockages in love life. Okay, well, what do we do about that? How do we fix that? And so that's where being a reader becomes a bit more than just laying out the cards and saying, this is what's going on. Because 9 times out of 10, the person already knows what's going on. They already know what their problem is. They already know what the blockage is. They already know where they're having bad luck, or why they, why they're sitting at the table across from you is because they already know what you're about to tell them. And I can't tell you how many times in the 30 years that I've been a reader that I've had the client come to me and say, lay out the cards and tell me what's going on, and then I lay it all out, and they're like, yeah, I already knew that. I just wanted confirmation of what I was already feeling. Okay, so if you already know and that person already knows. So now you're on the same page. You and the client are on the same page. What do you do about it? So we're going to cover that as well. We're going to cover how to use the tarot to determine what would be the most effective course of action for the person to take. What does that person do in order to make that work? Let's take a look at the tarot cards right here. So your tarot deck is basically broken up into different sections, different types of cards. So initially there's two divisions in the tarot. You have what is known as the major arcana, or the major mysteries, and then you have the minor arcana, or the minor mysteries. And so those are the two. Now, what is the difference between major and minor? Major arcana cards numbered 0 to 21, so there's 22 cards. The major arcana represents the influences in your life that are outside of your control. So whatever religious faith you follow, or whatever spiritual path you're on, those are the cards that represent the forces outside of the client, or the forces, if you're reading for yourself, outside of you. So if you are pagan, as I am, then this is telling you that the gods or divinity has some hand in what's happening right now. And so that will definitely determine how you go about handling a certain situation. So if you see major arcana cards in a reading, those are the ones you have to pay very close attention to, because those are forces that you don't have control over necessarily. Okay, so those are the ones that determine your course of action, so to speak. Now, the minor arcana are broken into 4 different sections, each representing one of the 4 elements of nature: earth, air, fire, and water. So you have the pinnacles, which represent earth, the element earth, and those have everything to do with money, business, work, those types of things. And then you have air, which in some people will use the swords as air, but for myself I use wands to represent air. And that has a lot to do with my magical training and my magical and occult studies. In some traditions, the wands are viewed as the fire element, and the swords are used or represented as air. And for me, I flip-flop those because it is my personal belief that that is a deliberate blind that was put into ancient older grimoires as a way to keep things from being to keep people who weren't studying seriously, to trick them up so that the things that they do wouldn't work as effectively. If you break it down from just a simple point of view, looking at the elements as they stand, a wand is made from the branch of a tree. If the tool or the element of magic is supposed to rule over an element, then it shouldn't be able to be destroyed by that element. So if you light a wand on fire, the wand is destroyed, so obviously it doesn't have control over fire. But it does have control over air, because as being from a tree, it's exposed to the wind constantly. Whereas swords are forged in fire. So to me, the sword is a more effective tool for fire. So I extrapolate that into my tarot interpretation. So for me, the wands represent air. So you have pinnacles for earth, wands for air. Air represents your intellect, study, things of that nature. And then you have the swords, which are fire, and they represent conflict. They represent struggles. Anytime that you see the swords in any kind of a reading, it's a heads up that there's problems involved. And then finally you have the cups or chalices, which is the element of water, which represents the emotions, the emotional states. So those are your minor arcana, and those represent your everyday life, the things that you are in control of. So in any given situation in life, there are things that you can control, and there are things that you can't control. And we need to learn to navigate around the things that we can't control. So kind of like sailing a ship. If you're sailing on a ship, you use the wind as a way to navigate. You work with it. You work with the tides. You work with the forces that are out of your control. You find a way to harness those to your advantage by manipulating the things that you can control. And that is exactly what a tarot reading should be. It should be a course of navigation towards your goal. So when you're reading for yourself, you want to read, or you're reading for a client, your goal is to try to find their path. What is the path of least resistance to their goal? What is their end result? What is it that they want to achieve by the end of this? And how do they go about doing it? So we're going to take it from there. So in the meantime, let's break down our tarot and let's look at what we have.
All right, so let's start with the minor arcana and breaking that down and understanding. Now, unique to the minor arcana are the 4 aces. Now, these are the most steadfast cards in the entire deck. Aces represent the root powers of each of the elements. So they are the only cards in a reading which are definitive and unchangeable. Whenever an ace shows up in a reading, the client cannot avoid that situation. Whatever that card is representing, whatever that card is telling them, it has to be dealt with. It can be worked around, but it can't be avoided. It has to be incorporated into that person's life. Those are roots. They can't be changed. So the aces are very, very important, and we'll get with that as we start doing sample readings. You'll understand a bit more of how that affects a reading and how important they are. Now, the next we have are the court cards. You'll notice in the previous clips that I showed of the different suits, the earth, air, fire, and water suits, that at the bottom there were 4 cards. Those represent the court cards, the royalty cards. Each suit has a king, queen, knight, and page. And these represent actual people, physical people, or spiritual presences, or spiritual energies that are causing the changes in the person's readings. So whenever you see a court card, understand that there's things happening. There's energies at work. There's no stability when there's a court card. Court cards are probably the most confusing for people just starting out in readings as to how to determine whether or not it represents a person or it represents a force or an energy. And when we get to the sample reading section, you'll know. So with the 4 kings, we have, the King of Pentacles, King of Rods, King of Swords, King of Cups. And the same with the queens, the knights, and the pages. The kings represent actual male figures sometimes, but they can also represent rapid and sometimes violent action. So whenever you see a king, know basically the shit's about to hit the fan. All right, so the king brings in a swift resolution, but the effects that the king brings in are often fleeting and fade out pretty quickly. So it's rapid change, almost like a firecracker going off. The king brings in all this energy, and it's boom, here's the situation, and then it fizzles out, and you're left to deal with the results. So kings can sometimes be a good thing, and sometimes not. So basically when you see a king, it's get off your dead ass and on your dying feet and get to work. That's usually what a king represents. Now the queens are a little bit different. The queen represents physical females, but it also symbolizes the power of creation, a force which develops. So it's a steady and unshaking force, but not quick like the kings, but it is definitely more enduring. So whenever a queen is influencing the reading, whenever the queen energy comes in to the reading, then we know that there's time. It's not going to be a real rapid influx of energy that's causing the changes or the things that are going on or stirring up the pot, so to speak. It is something that is nurturing. A seed has been planted, and the queen energy is growing it, is nurturing it, and it is bringing it into fruition. And eventually it will happen. And when it does happen, it'll be much more enduring than when the king does it, because the king just kind of throws it in there, and you're left to deal with the consequences. And the queen is a lot different. So the knights represent physically young males. So the kings and queens represent older male and female, and the knights and the pages represent young males, young females. But they also symbolize the power of action. And so the knight brings in action that is forceful like the king, but not as swift, and enduring like the Queen, but not as steadfast. Okay, so that's kind of your middle ground. When you see the Knight, you know that things are going to flow in a pretty natural way. Things are going to change, but they're going to change in a way that's, not so difficult for you to handle. It will last, but it won't be quite as enduring as with the Queen. So these are short-term goals that are manifesting when you see the Knight. The Knight is bringing that into fruition. And then finally we have the Pages, and the Pages represent physically young females. Some decks will have them listed as princesses, but the Pages represent young females, and they also symbolize the power of manifestation of the spiritual into the physical. So this manifestation can be either positive or negative depending on the position of the card and on the cards that are surrounding it. And again, as we get into sample readings, you'll understand this more and how that plays into it. But the Pages represent actual physical manifestation of goals or ideas. And a lot of times when you see a page in a reading, it's a physical message of some kind, whether it be a letter or a phone call, an email, but something physically manifesting that shows a culmination of the goals in mind. So something is about to happen or is already happening. Let's turn our attention now to the Major Arcana. The Major Arcana, as we discussed earlier, represent the major mysteries, and these are 22 cards numbered 0 to 21, which represent forces outside of the client or the individual who the reading is for. These are the external influences, the more powerful influences. So whenever these cards show up, they're pretty important, and they have a strong impact on the reading as a whole. Now, of the 22, they're broken down into 3 separate groups. So the first group is known as the 3 Essentials. And the 3 Essentials are the cards which are pivot points in a reading. When these show up, it is the reading suggesting that there's a turning point or a crossroads in the client's life. Change that is coming can be either positive or negative, and it can either be voluntary or involuntary depending on the card and where it's placed in the reading. These 3 cards are associated with the 3 essential elements of alchemy, which are salt, mercury, and sulfur. So these are core cards. These are extremely important cards, and when they show up, it is crucial that the reader pay close attention to what these cards are pointing towards. Now, the 7 ancient planets. These are 7 cards that symbolize the power of the ancient planets, and they will determine which energies permeate the reading. So their influence is also very profound and should be studied closely, but it's not a turning point. These cards influence the overall reading by basically radiating their energy outwards to the cards around them. And so what you have to do when these cards show up is look around it, look at the location, the place in the spread where this card shows up or these cards show up, and realize that this energy is going to radiate out and affect the rest of the reading as well, the cards that are around it. So this kind of sets a tone, so to speak, for the reading as a whole when these show up. And then finally we have the zodiac cards. These 12 cards represent the powers of the astrological signs of the zodiac. These cards, when they appear in a reading, will set the mood for what's coming or what's already happening in the person's life. I can't stress enough that a basic, at least a rudimentary knowledge of astrology will be extremely helpful in reading the tarot or actually any form of divination at all. But knowledge of the zodiac signs and the planetary influences can really bring your readings and the accuracy of your readings up to a very higher standard, a higher notch. So, and we'll discuss all of that in detail as we move into further lessons in this series. So for now, that is the breakdown of your minor arcana and your major arcana.
All right, and that's it for our first video, your introduction into the tarot deck. I hope that you have a little bit more understanding from it. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button here down below. Also, you can check us out at Patreon. I've got all of those links in the section below for you to be able to check us out on Patreon, also on Facebook, for those of you who are interested in a little bit more information and being able to converse with us regularly. Also, if you go to the Facebook page or the Patreon page, either one, you can book a reading with me personally. And also, I'd like to take this opportunity to explain to everyone who's watching this video that the Neophytes, which is the title of this program, is actually going to be both tutorials like you see here, and also a series where we're going to take 5 students or more and bring them in and teach them different aspects of paganism, the occult, magic, witchcraft, all of those good things. So you guys can see that and see their development and see how they adapt to that situation. We'll also be going on some paranormal investigations, and we'll actually have clients come on the show for readings and for ritual work to be done, so that you can see how these things actually work in real life. Like I said, I've been doing this for over 30 years now. I've been a reader for 30 years, but I've been doing studying the occult for longer than that. And it's a part of my life, and something that people have always asked me a lot of questions about, like how does this work, or how does that work, or you know, how do you believe in these things, you know, in today's day and age. So you can see that actually working out through the series that we're going to be doing with the Neophytes, and see how I've used these and continue to use these techniques and these philosophies to make my life more sustainable and more enjoyable, because it's all about having a good time and making memories and living life to the fullest. So stay tuned, like and subscribe, and if you're interested, hit us up on Facebook and get a reading, whatever you need. See you then.